We're only a few days away from the start of the Asia Cup, and since you guys absolutely killed it on my predictions video for the group stage, I thought I should do a superlatives video for the Asia Cup on who I think would be the dark horses, biggest flop or disappointment from the big countries, and which nation do I think will win this year's tournament. But before we get started, I wanted to say welcome to all our new subscribers, all these new fans from across the Asian globe. Welcome to my channel. And I wanted to remind you all that I will be doing watch alongs for all of Iran's matches throughout the Asia Cup and the bigger ladder stage matches in the tournament. So if that's something that you guys are interested in joining me for, regardless if you're a fan of the opposing team or any other Asian nation at this tournament, it's always a ton of fun regardless of what team you support. I left the links to all of the watch alongs for Iran's group stage matches, so make sure to click notify me or just subscribe so you guys are prepared for when that happens. So to get started, let's first talk about the dark horses. And for all of you that don't understand the term dark horse, it basically means an underdog in this tournament, someone that we don't expect to do well that will do really well in this tournament. A good example could be Morocco in the previous World Cup, Wales in Euro 2016. I did forget to mention for each of the superlatives that I will be talking about in this video, I do want to give like one or two nations shouts in each category, because if I just give it for one nation each time, this video is going to be very quick, and I think there's many nations that deserve some credit in each category. If you guys watch my group stage prediction video, you kind of might know who I'm about to mention. For the first nation, I'm gonna say Uzbekistan. I know the loss of Shomurodov is gonna be a big hit for this nation, but I still think they can do it. Uzbekistan's youth teams have been killing it, where we recently saw them win the U23 Asia Cup, and they have been developing some crazy talented players. And in some of their most recent friendlies, in particular against the United States and Mexico, who are two of the best nations in CONCACAF, Uzbekistan played really well. Don't mind the scoreline of that 3-0 loss against the USA. They played superbly in that match. That scoreline is absolutely deceiving, but as well, going toe-to-toe against Mexico in the United States as well, the White Wolves might have something surprising cooking up for themselves in this tournament. We have seen a lot of their success mainly be at the youth level and hasn't quite translated yet to the senior level, but I think at some point they're gonna make that statement, and I think it's gonna be at this tournament. They have a fairly straightforward group, and I still do think they could possibly push Australia for the first place spot. I do think though it is very likely they'll finish in second place, but I wouldn't be surprised if they might make a quarter-final finish in this year's tournament. And then for the other nation I want to show some love to, that's gonna be Oman. This nation has impressed me so much in the last couple of years, more particularly in Asian World Cup qualification in the previous cycle. They were in a really tough group with the likes of Japan, Australia, and they still were able to beat Japan, put Australia to the sword, and narrowly missed out on World Cup qualification. You can see that they know how to level up in those bigger matches against the bigger Asian nations, but they do struggle a little bit when the pressure and the emphasis is more on them against the more minnow sides. They're kind of in this interesting in-between bracket where they're better than the Asian minnows, but they're not quite there compared to the other bigger Asian nations. They're kind of in this little tweener situation, so if they could put it together, they could have a decent run at this Asia Cup. And again, similar to Uzbekistan, they have a pretty simple group for the most part, so they could cause some damage. And with Saudi Arabia being their most challenging opponents in their group, where we have seen Saudi Arabia be arguably one of the top Asian nations that always don't perform in Asia Cups, they could possibly finish in first place. I know Saudi Arabia recently hired Roberto Mancini, and there's been a little bit more of a resurgence for this national team, but it's gonna take some time for Mancini's tactics for this team to kind of start gelding together. I think this is gonna be more of like a future 2026 plan for that nation, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's gonna be a lot of ups and downs and bumps in the road for this national team. I don't think it's gonna quite come together in this tournament, so I wouldn't totally be surprised if we could see Oman finish top of this group, which would set them up for an easier first round knockout stage match. Now next up is the biggest flops or disappointments I think we might see in this tournament. So how I like to look at this category is more of one of the bigger nations that's gonna stoop below expectations at this tournament, or just absolutely shit the bed. And for me, I think there's two nations that could possibly fall under this category. And for the first nation, I hate to say it because it is my national team, it's gotta possibly be Iran. The national team has been on a downward slope the last couple of years. They recently hired Amir Qalanoui, who I don't rate one bit. Many Iranian fans don't rate one bit. Obviously, on paper, with the record under Qalanoui, Iran hasn't lost any matches, so it looks fine. But as someone that has watched every single match, seen the tactics, how Iran has performed, they've just been very, very mid. And on top of that, his squad call-ups are absolutely shocking, and especially at this Asia Cup. Iran is going into this tournament with one of the oldest squads. And I hate to see it because after this previous World Cup, I've been preaching this national team needs to just start giving the young talent opportunities. The old guard should have died the moment Iran lost to the USA at the World Cup. That should have been the end of it. This past year should have been the time where Iran, Ghalenoui, called up some experienced players but started truly embedding the young talent, which he didn't do. They went with the ethos, hey, let's put in our more experienced players, let's try to win this Asia Cup. So for the fact that Iran has called up an old and experienced squad that have failed time after time at the Asia Cup and the World Cup, and in my eyes, and with the players you've called up, and with what has been said by the coach, the players, what the federation wants, they're going in to try to make it to the Asia Cup final. I just don't think it's gonna happen. There are so many glaring issues with this team going into the tournament. Obviously, one of the things that I mentioned was the squad call-ups. And I guess I'll go on a quick little tangent about some of the players that shouldn't be there, should be there. When it comes to some of the defenders, I don't personally rate Khalilzadeh or Kanani. I think they're both just mid as fuck defenders. I mean, Hasbavi, who is arguably one of Iran's best young talents, for sure the best young defender Iran has got, didn't get called up, which is absolutely criminal because in my opinion, I would play Hasbavi and Majid Hosseini together as the center back duo. The midfield, oh my god, it's absolutely shocking. Omid Ibrahimi, yes, was an absolute trooper for us back in 2018, but it is 2024. My guy is 36 years old. He's one more Kubide away from retirement, and he's still getting called up for us in major tournaments. And as well, Ruzbek Cheshmi, I know he scored the goal against Wales, but he should have never been called up for the World Cup initially. And fuck no, he should have been getting called up for the Asia Cup. The midfield is shit, and he's only called up 4 midfielders. Nurlahi, Kadimi, who's been absolutely killing it in the last couple of months in Turkey, and Hossein Nejat, who again, like Hasbavi, is one of Iran's best young talents who initially was a part of the squad, but got cut from the squad because they added an extra player because they weren't sure if Azmoun would be available to be selected from Roma because they wanted to keep him initially, but of course, they let him go to the Asia Cup. So out of all the players, you cut him? One of the more creative attacking midfield options. Like, bro, what are you doing? And then don't get me started on the forwards. Moghalu, Asadi, what the f? We don't need 5 strikers. Like, god damn it, Ghalenoui. You're gonna give all us Iranians an absolute brain stroke with how brain dead these decisions were on his squad selection. And I will say it, and I will say it for the last time. Start playing the young kids. Cut out this short-term mindset of winning and success right now for a long-term goal where we could see Iranian football actually look good in the future. All right, now that I got that off my chest, the other nation that I do want to mention, which is a little bit of a surprise, I'm gonna say Japan. Just wait a minute before you guys all give me your hate comments. Just let me cook for a second. In everyone's point of view, which I totally agree with, Japan are the clear favorites to win this tournament. They've been on an absolute tear since the 2022 World Cup. They are clapping some of the best European nations like it's nobody's business. And there's heavy expectation for them that they should easily win the Asia Cup. And because I think there's so much expectation for Japan that they have to clean sweep this tournament, easily, comfortably win the Asia Cup, I think that pressure is going to be a little bit too much for this nation. And this is a small observation that I noticed with head coach Moriyasu, that when it comes to him setting up against some of the bigger nations like they did when they played against Croatia, Spain, Germany, he knows how to set up tactically well, but when he does have to face off against more of like those minnows, the tweener teams in Asia, or for example Costa Rica, he overthinks it. He doesn't know how to set up well in those kind of matches. And since the Asia Cup, they aren't really gonna face anyone that is on their level or more superior, maybe outside of South Korea and Australia. I think that's where we could see those slight hiccups from Japan. I do think Japan will easily at least make it to the semifinals and most likely the final, but I just don't see them winning it. And then now for the most important part of this video, who do I think will win the Asia Cup? You guys watched my group stage prediction, which I've mentioned many times. You already know I'm saying South Korea, but I'm gonna add another bonus nation to this video. But first, to talk about South Korea. I know this nation hasn't won the Asia Cup in God knows how long, and they're long overdue for it. And I know they have a little bit of a dunce of a coach with Jurgen Klopp. Klinsmann. But I will say the performances have been back to normal and good for South Korea leading up to the Asia Cup, and I think that's the most important part. But I think with the superpower options they have, Hwang Hee-chan, Lee Kang-in, Kim Min-jae, Hoi Min-sun, those are 4 players that I don't think any Asian nation at this tournament can defend and can suppress when they're all clicking, or even just 2 of the 4 or 3 of the 4. No Asian nation has that kind of firepower from back to front. But then for the other nation that I think could win the Asia Cup, surprisingly, they're not mentioned at all in this conversation, and that is Australia. They played really well at the World Cup, and I was thoroughly impressed with them in the tournament. I mean, their only 2 losses came against the finalists of the tournament. The injury to Lecky is a bit of a blow for the national team, and I know that's gonna hurt them a little bit, but luckily for them, they do have absolute beasts and ballers from the down under. And as well, to add on to that, they were one of the more recent winners who won it in 2015, so they have that experience in the more recent decade. And unlike all the other Asian nations, they have that physicality aspect that none of the others have. To get stuck in, win those 50-50 duels, the aerial battles, the midfield battles, Australia's got that in their locker, and I think that could make that marginal difference in those tight, close games in the semifinals, finals, that can help you win this tournament. But nonetheless, boys and girls, my opinion only matters so much. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Do you guys agree with any of my predictions? Do you guys completely disagree with any of my predictions? The comments is the place where you guys can give me all your thoughts, so make sure to let me know down below. As I've already mentioned a gajillion times, we'll be doing many watch-alongs for the Asia Cup, so make sure to be there or be square. But boys and girls, I hope you'll have a lovely day.